Picture a rugged land of dense forests, winding rivers, and steep mountains, a place where the authority of kings meant little, and the survival of farmers depended more on the strength of their rifles than on the promises written in distant capitals. Now imagine that this land declared independence, not just from the most powerful empire on earth, but also from the brand new nation that was fighting to be born. For 14 strange and turbulent years, this territory existed as its own country, defiant, unrecognized, determined to protect the land its people believed was rightfully theirs. This was the story of the Vermont Republic, a forgotten chapter of the American Revolution when frontiersmen stood against both British authority and American ambition. Its origins began not with war, but with land. In the mid-1700s, the fertile valleys and thick forests of the Green Mountains were considered frontier territory. Two colonial governments claimed it, the province of New York and the province of New Hampshire. Both began issuing land grants to settlers. But neither colony agreed on who actually controlled the region. This meant that the same piece of land could be legally granted to two different owners. Imagine spending years cutting trees, building a cabin, and planting crops, only to have another man arrive with official documents claiming the land was his. For many settlers, this wasn't just frustrating, it was a direct threat to their livelihood. The farmers who lived in these mountain valleys began organizing themselves into armed groups. The most famous of these groups became known as the Green Mountain Boys. Their leader was a bold and fiery frontiersman named Ethan Allen. Allen and his followers believed that the land belonged to those who worked it, not to distant colonial governors handing out paperwork. When officials from New York attempted to enforce their authority, the Green Mountain Boys resisted. Surveyors were chased away, officials were threatened. In some cases, settlers loyal to New York were forcibly removed from their homes. What began as a land dispute quickly turned into open resistance. Then, in 1775, the American colonies erupted into rebellion against the British Empire. The American Revolution had begun. For the settlers of the Green Mountains, this created a complicated situation. They shared the colony's anger toward Britain, but they also distrusted the governments of neighboring colonies, especially New York, which had tried to seize their land. Caught between empires and revolutionary governments, the settlers made a remarkable decision. In 1777, representatives from the region gathered in the small frontier town of Westminster. There, they declared independence. But not just from Britain, they also declared independence from the American colonies themselves. A new country was born, the Vermont Republic. The new republic quickly created a government and drafted a constitution, one of the most progressive documents of its time. It abolished adult slavery. It allowed greater voting rights for property-owning men, and it established a system of independent governance. For the people living there, Vermont was no longer a disputed territory. It was their nation, yet the new republic faced enormous challenges. Neither Britain nor the United States recognized Vermont as a legitimate country. To American leaders, Vermont was technically land claimed by New York. Admitting Vermont as an independent state could create legal chaos over land ownership. Meanwhile, British officials in Canada saw an opportunity. They quietly opened negotiations with Vermont's leaders. Some historians believe the British hoped Vermont might rejoin the empire or become a loyal buffer state between Canada and the rebellious American colonies. These secret negotiations caused alarm among American leaders. If Vermont sided with Britain, it could threaten the northern frontier of the Revolution. At the same time, Vermont's leaders were playing a careful political game. They needed recognition, they needed security, and they needed time. So for years, Vermont existed in diplomatic limbo, negotiating with Britain while cautiously building relationships with the United States. All the while, its citizens continued to farm, trade, and defend their mountain homeland. The Republic even created its own currency and postal system. For 14 years, it functioned as an independent country. But the political tensions surrounding Vermont could not last forever. Eventually, negotiations began to resolve the long-standing dispute with New York. New York agreed to relinquish its claims to the territory. With that obstacle removed, Vermont finally sought admission into the United States. In 1791, 14 years after declaring independence, The Vermont Republic officially became the 14th state of the United States. Its time as an independent nation had come to an end. But the story of Vermont's sovereignty struggle reveals something powerful about the early years of America. The birth of the United States was not a clean or simple process. Borders were uncertain. Loyalties were divided. And the idea of what the nation would become was still being negotiated by people living on distant frontiers. In those uncertain years, a group of determined settlers carved out their own republic in the mountains, refusing to surrender their land to kings, colonies, or politicians. For a brief moment in history, Vermont stood alone between empires. A rogue nation born from land disputes, frontier defiance, and the determination of ordinary people protecting the soil beneath their feet. And its story reminds us that the map of America we see today was shaped not only by famous battles and founding fathers, but also by forgotten republics, stubborn farmers, and the fragile negotiations that turned chaos into a country. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden chapter of history, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss these deep dives into forgotten stories that shaped our world. And tell us in the comments, did you know that Vermont was once its own country? Or do you think other territories during the American Revolution could have followed the same path? Your thoughts help keep the conversation alive, and they help this channel continue bringing fascinating history back into the spotlight.